it's as others have said, it's wonderful to be here today. It's an important moment. And I guess coming at the end, a lot of what I would have said have already been said. I mean, I think some of what's come out, the importance of really looking at what the drivers of vulnerability are, and not just coming with our own solutions and saying, oh, this worked somewhere else, let's try it here. But really understanding from the communities themselves what they understand to be the drivers of vulnerability. And understanding that vulnerability isn't just an expression of can't just be expressed in terms of finance. So we can't just say, oh, the GDP of this country is really low, so that is a vulnerable country. There are communities with few assets. So actually, when the shock happens, a climate shock happens, their losses, the well-being losses that they're experiencing, not being experienced in losses of assets that can be evaluated and added up in terms of finance. It's in other terms. So what's wonderful about the roof over our heads is this focus on people's choices and people's aspirations. If we can, I mean, and others have been talking about the sort of, the increasing intensity of shocks, the increasing intensity of these increasing winds, increasing heat, increasing flooding. And with both the increasing frequency and the increasing intensity, it's also not just about one-off events, it's about how those events accumulate and how they compound each other over time. So having a focus on something that really matters to communities themselves, and having a campaign that really listens, I think is going to be of great value. But the nature of this discussion, of all of these different actors, we're all coming together with slightly different perspectives and slightly different organizations. I'm really interested to see how we can build different types of collaboration. Somebody else talked about not just being a process of coordination, and I would second that. If we're not careful, we spend all our time just talking to each other and saying, well, I'm doing this, so you better do that. But actually what we need is different forms of collaboration now, and being the only way to be able to respond to the sort of unexpected events of the future is if we start to build really strong processes of collaboration across governance scales and across stakeholders and different actors. And that requires different ways of working, and it requires having a much more flexible and much more responsive means of getting finance, getting support, but also getting the authority to make decisions down to the right level for that decision-making process. So it's been really great to hear so many different people speaking about different aspects of what's needed. And it really does feel that if we could build that, a novel way of collaborating, a new way of doing things, which can really attract finance at the sort of scales that we need, but also not coming with pre-prepared solutions in every case, but coming with the ability to listen and respond and know who to bring in for what types of responses, I think could be really exciting. And I guess the other aspect of this is that things are tough at the moment, aren't they, internationally? Things aren't particularly well aligned for a big scale up of ambition for the very poorest people. And yet this is the very moment where we're beginning to win the narrative, as it were, and people are much more likely to be talking about locally led action for climate, nature and poverty. And yet the scales of finance that we need aren't coming out. Will we hear it this year in the run up to COP27? It seems less likely than it should be. But there has been a promise of doubling adaptation finance, and for the very poorest communities, adaptation is needed. But I think we also have to really change the narrative from, what's development, what's climate, to being about helping the very poorest communities shift fast onto climate resilient development pathways. So we're talking about this collaboration, not just within a particular sector or within a particular framing, but talking about bringing everyone together and really beginning to shift those development pathways at the sort of scale and speed that's needed. And then making it so much easier for those providing the finance to know where to put it. So we're offering large scale opportunities where finance can be put in at the sort of scale that's needed. And the collaborative effort, as it were, is about making sure that gets to the right places at the right times, and being flexible and responsive to changing circumstances on the ground. So it's been great to hear about the campaign. It's great to hear all the people that are so enthusiastically going to be part of it. And I do hope that we at IIED can do our bit and help support the processes and help think through actually how to frame this in a way that will make it possible to do at the sort of scales and speed that we need. Thank you so much, Sheila.